I'm gonna start talking. We're gonna go for it. All right, hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Gabriela Romeo. I am the Public Policy Director with the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, a division of Respect Together. I wanna thank you all for coming today and joining us. We are gathered at the Capitol for one reason, to be heard and for a call to action. Across the state, survivors of sexual violence are reaching out for help every single day. And every day, rape crisis centers are there, answering calls, providing counseling, showing up in hospitals, courtrooms, and communities. They are doing everything they can, but they are being asked to do more with less. For years, funding for these services has remained flat, while demand continues to grow. And let's be clear, flat funding is not neutral. It's a cut to survivor services. This means longer waits, fewer resources, and real barriers for people who need support right now. Today is about making sure those realities are seen, heard, and understood. You'll hear from advocates, leaders, survivors who know this work firsthand, who will speak to both the impact of these services and the consequences of not investing in them. Because this is not abstract. This is happening right now in communities across Pennsylvania, and survivors cannot wait. As we call for action today, it's important to understand the scale of what's at stake. Our next speaker, Yolanda Edrington, leads efforts to support survivors and prevent violence across the country. So with that, I will turn it over to Yolanda.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for showing and joining us today. I want to welcome survivors, advocates, senators, and guests to the third annual PCAR Advocacy Day. We are here today because we share a shared commitment to end sexual abuse, assault, and harassment. We are here because that commitment must be backed by action. Our collective strength makes our movement powerful and demonstrates that real change is possible. In our work, we witness the determination of the human spirit. Survivors of sexual violence demonstrate this strength daily. Their resilience and willingness to seek help have likely impacted each of us here. But resilience should not be the requirement for survival. Survivors should not have to fight this hard just to be supported. And yet, here we are. For 6 years, funding for rape crisis services has remained flat, while demand has increased. And the pleas of rape crisis centers have gone unheard. Today at the Capitol, we say, you will hear us now. Pennsylvania has long been a leader in building a network of support for survivors. The Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect has helped shape what survivor services look like across the country. It was built through decades of partnership, investment, and a shared commitment to care for survivors. And yet, right now, we are watching that system crack, not because it failed, but because it has been underfunded, stretched to its limit, and asked to carry more than it can currently hold. And the consequences are real. Technology is being used to create and distribute manipulated images, often targeting young people. What may begin online does not stay online. It follows survivors in their schools, their communities, and their daily lives. AI-generated abuse is abuse. And right now, our systems are not equipped to respond at the scale or speed that this moment demands. Advocates need specialized training. Prevention programs need to evolve. Communities need education on digital safety. But without funding, we cannot keep up. At the same time, human trafficking cases have surged across Pennsylvania, leaving centers to respond rapidly. Centers are working at capacity while running out of resources to sustain this work. Proposed statute of limitations reforms threaten to further increase this caseload, without guaranteeing any additional resources. These realities require action, urgent action. These are not future challenges. They are happening right now, and yet the funding has not changed. The $12.5 million increase we are calling for today is needed to stabilize a system that has been pushed to its limits after 6 years of flat funding. Let's be clear, what is at stake today? This isn't about whether a survivor who calls a hotline will hear a voice on the other end, whether an advocate can show up at a hospital, whether a young person facing online exploitation has someone who knows how to help, whether communities across Pennsylvania have the tools to prevent violence before it even happens. This is a public health crisis, and it demands a public response. The stakes are too high to ignore. Now is the time for Pennsylvania to prioritize life-saving public health services. Now is the time for leadership. Now is the time for action. Because if we do not act, the system will crack. And when that happens, it is survivors who will fall through these cracks. We cannot wait. Increasing DHS rape crisis funding by $12.5 million is not just important, it is essential to ensure the survival of the anti-sexual violence movement and to protect the safety of everyone in our community across the Commonwealth. Let me say that again, everyone across the Commonwealth. Together as survivors, allies, and advocates, we hold real power to create change. Let us make our voices impossible to ignore. We are calling on leaders to act without delay and invest in the safety and healing of every Pennsylvanian. When we fund these services, we are protecting our neighbors, every neighbor, every community, every person across Pennsylvania. And we are building a safer Pennsylvania for every person. Stand with us today and help us create a future where everyone is respected. Thank you all.
Thank you, Yolanda. And statewide leadership matters, but this work comes to life in communities every single day. And so now it's my pleasure to turn things over to hear from Michelle Hamilton, an advocate working on the front lines.
All right. So good afternoon. Okay, got it. Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Hamilton. And this September, I will be celebrating 20 years working at Center Safe in Center County, PA. Center Safe is one of 47 rape crisis centers in the Commonwealth that covers the entire Commonwealth. So these 47 centers cover all of our counties and stuff. And I'm very proud to be part of a team that delivers confidential, free counseling, medical accompaniment, and legal advocacy to survivors of sexual violence, their significant others, and prevention education in our communities. But I would like to talk for like a couple of minutes about some other very important anniversaries that bring us all here together. So I want to start with 50th and stuff. So in 1976, Pennsylvania signed one of the first rape shield laws in the country. This set the standard for professional, confidential, and free services to survivors of sexual violence, setting up the first 24-hour hotlines, which still exist today, and legal protections. We who work at rape crisis centers are the beneficiaries of these visionary advocates. Between 2024 and 2025, rape crisis centers in this Commonwealth answered over 7,458 hotline calls from survivors. Often, we are one of the first people that survivors share their stories with. 40th. So this is the 40th anniversary of SART response. In the 1980s, services for sexual assault survivors expanded to include what is called sexual assault response team protocols. Now, as advocates, we are part of a hospital response that is designed to be more trauma-informed, where there's a trained nurse, a trained police officer, and us as the counselor advocate, attending to the emotional needs of the survivor and linking them with services. This is a more trauma-informed level of care and also a way of walking the survivor through the legal process if they choose to do so. This is also, I want to hit another 40 and stuff, since one of the things that we do very well is working with adult survivors of childhood sexual violence. And 40 is the average age that many adult survivors of childhood sexual violence feel safe enough to talk about their experiences and to work on their healing. As advocates, through individual and group counseling and other methods, we work to create a healing space for survivors and to help them to deal with the trauma of what has happened, to walk through the legal system if they're able to do so. 19 years ago, we had the very first child advocacy centers in Pennsylvania. This increased the number of families that we could work with. Now there is a trained, coordinated effort between Children and Youth Services, agencies, a trained forensics interviewer, so that children who are the victims of sexual violence do not have to tell their story to 5 different people in 5 different rooms. There's a coordinated response. This has been very helpful, obviously more trauma-informed for child victims, but also helpful to their families. And this is a safety net where we, as the advocates, can find the needs and stuff and resources that these families need and help them get connected to it. Let's see. And then 10 years ago, we had our very first sexual assault protection orders. So what this is basically, for the first time, we were able to work with survivors on civil legal processes where the perpetrator was a neighbor or a friend or a student. All of these things increased the amount of survivors that we were able to work with. But all of these programs need funding in order to exist and expand and grow. And then 5 years ago, we expanded the Rape Shield law to include human trafficking. So now we are able to work with trafficking survivors in a much more involved way, especially around issues of prosecution and housing. So all of these types of programs are important. I also need to call out our prevention educators who do an incredible job of being in our community. They are talking to our friends and our neighbors, educating them on sexual violence, helping them to be bystanders, helping them to be supportive when someone tells their story, when a survivor tells their story. They're providing the bedrock of what a safe community for survivors of violence should look like, and also showing that we, as rape crisis centers, are places that people can go. All of these services have increased. However, the state funding needed for these services have been flat from 2001 to 2021 to 2025. In addition, there's been a decrease 20% in federal funding, which also affects our programs and stuff. Last year, as providers, we saw 26,000 survivors across the Commonwealth. Without a committed increase to the DHS rape crisis line, we will struggle to meet the needs of survivors. We want to continue to do this vital work, and we're asking for a commitment from our legislature to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to point out a couple of things. One, I think Michelle gave a really great picture of what you could expect if you walked into a rape crisis center today, tomorrow, any given day, the amount of work that these folks do every single day and the variety of it and the amount of people that they help. And note that she noted there are about 26,000 survivors that were served last year, and those are just the people that came forward and asked for help. There are a lot more folks out there, and we want them to know that these services will always exist for them and always be around, but that requires funding, like she said. And with that, I would like to turn this over next to, so you can hear directly from a survivor, and Maria Gardner is going to take the mic next.
I want to thank the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect for the opportunity to be here today and for their commitment to elevating sexual assault survivors at all phases of their recovery. It feels really good to be here among so many fellow survivors and allies. I wish we could spend more time celebrating our survivorhood, and I believe someday we will. But unfortunately, until the Pennsylvania legislature allocates funds for rape crisis centers that are proportionate to the needs of survivors, I will stand here and share my story of surviving sexual violence in hopes that they start to give a damn. I first met someone from my local rape crisis center, Pittsburgh Action Against Rape, or PAR, in an emergency room at McGee Women's Hospital almost 5 years ago. I had arrived there in the back seat of a squad car after being assaulted by a stranger on the Allegheny River Trail during my lunch break. I was 10 weeks pregnant at the time. I was alone, shaken, and dazed. To my relief, a person appeared at my bedside not long after I was admitted. She introduced herself as an advocate from PAR. Her job was to support me through every step of the process: the forensic medical exam, the police report, the physical and the emotional toll. She reminded me that I had agency in a moment that I thought I had none. When a detective asked if I wanted to press charges, my advocate helped me understand the full spectrum of that decision. She told me that testifying rarely provides the emotional closure depicted on TV, but that pursuing legal action was a chance to prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else. I chose to do it. As I prepared for court, my advocate was the liaison between me and the district attorney's office. She relayed complex and heavy information in a trauma-informed way so that I could make decisions without collapsing under the weight of it all. When I testified in front of a jury, she physically stood between me and my assaulter. After he was convicted, my advocate later read my victim impact statement at the sentencing hearing so that I could stay home and care for my newborn baby. I could not have survived this experience without the support of a rape crisis center. I would have either been unable to testify, or if I did, it would have completely broken me. I was 8 months pregnant at the time of the trial. I had a full-time job, a home, and a 2-year-old to take care of. My advocate made justice possible with my life still mostly intact. Rape crisis centers are part of our public safety infrastructure. They make our streets and our trails safer. I was not my assaulter's first victim. I was the last of several who reported him before me. If I hadn't gone through with the trial, the chances are high that he would hurt someone else again. The fact that my assaulter received a fair trial and is now serving his sentence is directly tied to a rape crisis center's ability to provide services for me. The support that rape crisis centers provide cannot be replicated. It requires a deep understanding of the medical system, the justice system, of trauma psychology, of therapeutic techniques. I could go on. Advocates sit with survivors through darkness, and they do it while being underfunded, understaffed, and in the precarious position of relentlessly begging to be considered worthy of investment from our legislature. It's been 5 years, or 6 years, since Pennsylvania's rape crisis centers have seen a funding increase. We need it yesterday. Living through my sexual assault trial was just as traumatic as the sexual assault itself. It is an incredible injustice that survivors like me make the sacrifice of testifying to protect others, and yet our elected leaders leave us to suffer the consequences on our own. Pennsylvania legislature, I'm speaking directly to you. Sexual violence does not care about political party affiliations. Rape crisis centers are a bipartisan cause. Please don't let even a single survivor testify in front of their assaulter without trained support. And please don't make me get up here to remind you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I have to say that is not the first time that I've heard Maria share that story, but every time I've heard it, it makes me emotional. And I think I see some emotional faces in the crowd as well. And I want to thank Maria for her resilience and bravery for driving from Pittsburgh today to come and advocate with us. Next, I'm going to hand things over to Lakeisha Anthony. She's a leader working every day to ensure that services are where they're needed. So thank you, Lakeisha.
Good afternoon. My name is Lakeisha Anthony, and I am the Acting Executive Director of WAR Philadelphia Center Against Sexual Violence, Philadelphia's only rape crisis center. We've been a vital lifeline for survivors for over 50 years. WAR has helped build this movement. As the first rape crisis center in Pennsylvania, we set the foundation for the services that survivors rely on today. Now we're watching that foundation crack because of the state's failure to invest in centers across Pennsylvania. And now we're at risk of crumbling. In Philadelphia, the communities most impacted by sexual violence are Black, brown, and LGBTQI residents who are being left without the support they deserve. These groups are already navigating systemic barriers. When funding is cut or held flat, those inequities deepen, access narrows, and the very people who need support the most are the ones most likely to go without. No survivor should have to grapple with that thought when they should be prioritizing their survival. Flat funding year after year has created a quiet crisis, coupled with a 4.5-month budget impasse last year that exasperated the issue for many of us. At WAR, it meant laying off over half of our staff, losing dedicated staff that do this work day in and day out, breaking the trust of survivors who depend on our services, survivors who stepped out to be able to trust again, to be faced with an issue that makes them not want to trust any services. It means a wait list that we work diligently to get down to 0, that's back in double digits. It means our advocates are working tirelessly, but within a system that is under-resourced and overextended. Although we're rebuilding with scaffolding that's not fully secure as the cost and demand continues to rise. That looks like longer wait times for counseling, increased caseloads for staff, and difficult decisions about how to prioritize services. While costs rise, demand increases, and the complexity of cases grow, our funding has not kept pace. The result is that we are being forced to stretch limited resources further than they should ever have to go, further than what they've meant to go. In a time when sexual assault is on the rise in Philadelphia, that should not be the case. And for survivors, it means more uncertainty. It means not knowing if there's going to be someone available to answer the hotline. It means waiting longer time for trauma-informed care. It means, in some cases, not getting support at all. Therefore, we're calling on state leaders to act with urgency. This means increasing funding for rape crisis services, ensuring resources are distributed equitably, and recognizing that these programs are a critical part of public health and safety infrastructure. Investing in survivors is not an expense, it's a responsibility. To our elected officials and decision makers, the choices you make right now will determine whether this foundation continues to hold and be strong, or whether it gives way. We need action, we need investment, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lakeisha. I also feel moved every time that I hear Lakeisha speak. She's such a powerful speaker, and I'm so glad she's able to be here with us today. And I want to note next that support doesn't end with services. It must extend into justice. And our next speaker reminds us of the impact of state-level funded legal services have on survivors and what their journey can look like. So I will now pass things over to Shannon Keeler.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Keeler. In November, PCAR helped me successfully get my 12-year-old case prosecuted. But before that, I wasn't sure that my voice mattered. More than a decade ago, I was an 18-year-old freshman at Gettysburg College, quite excited about my future, trusted the world and the institutions around me. And then one night, everything changed. I reported what happened to me immediately. I did everything I was supposed to do. I spoke to the police. I got a rape kit. I told my truth over and over again. And still, years went by and nothing happened. No charges, no accountability, nothing. I was told there wasn't enough evidence. I was told my rape kit was destroyed. I was told that California was out of Adams County's jurisdiction. I was told I was a pretty girl, and do you really want to go through that? The trial? I was told in so many ways to move on. And I did, or I thought I did. But the truth is, you don't just move on from something like this. The trauma doesn't stay in that moment, it follows you. It changes how you see yourself, your body, your safety, your future. For years, I carried that. Until one day, years later, I opened up a message on Facebook that I wasn't expecting, 7 years later. And it said a lot of things, but the one that caught my attention was, "So I raped you." And suddenly that case that had been dismissed came back to life. And when it was dismissed, the prosecutor at the time had told me that I had alcohol in my system, so that was very difficult to prosecute. That was the reason. But here's the part people don't see. Justice didn't just happen because of that message. Justice happened because I had support. I had people who believed me. I had advocates like Andrea Levy and PCAR who stood by my side for, I think it was 5 years as we pursued this after I got the confession. I had legal support that helped me navigate a system that shut its doors to me and so many others. Programs like PCAR make that possible. They help me understand my rights. They helped me get my case heard in the media, which then led to a charge. They helped me stay sane while Ian fled justice for 3 years. They helped me make sure I wasn't alone when I walked back into that courtroom in November, face to face with the person who hurt me. And after 12 years, there was finally accountability. But it came at a cost. Evidence was lost, time was lost, and parts of my life I'll never get back. I share my story not today, not because it's easy, but because it matters. Because I know I'm not the only one. In fact, I know I'm the exception. I had the support, the resources, and the ability to keep pushing when the system failed me. The rules of the law generally are right, but they mean very little if they're not enforced. They're based on right and wrong, right? We need to support organizations like PCAR that are here to champion the rights of victims, to ensure that victims' voices are heard and the laws, the laws of our society are upheld. That's what's at stake right now. Programs like PCAR and rape crisis services across Pennsylvania are funded by the state. They are not optional. They are not extra. They are the reasons survivors can pursue justice at all. Without them, survivors are left to navigate one of the most complex, re-traumatizing systems completely alone. I need you to hear this. If PCAR was not there for me, justice would not have been served. I don't know if my case would have ever been reopened. I don't know if I would have had the strength to keep going. And I think about the next survivor. The one who's 18 years old right now, the one who's deciding whether or not to report, and the one who's asking, will anyone believe me? What happens to them if these services aren't there? What happens to them if they never get the support that I had? I would hate to think that someone in my position, someone who deserves justice, healing, and support never gets the chance because we chose not to invest. Survivors can't wait. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to be supported. And they deserve accountability from our lawmakers. They deserve justice. And that only happens, I truly believe that only happens if we fund the services that protect the rights of victims, like PCAR. So today I'm asking you, not just as a survivor, but as someone who has lived what happens when the system fails, please fund these programs, please protect these services, and please make sure that no survivor has to stand where I once stood, alone, unheard, and without support. Because when you fund these services, you are funding justice, you're funding healing, and you're funding hope. Thank you.
I want to thank Shannon. And before we move on to our final speaker, I think both survivors that joined us today deserve another round of applause for coming. Yeah. They were immensely brave, and I think that's a reminder of why we're here, why we show up every day, or why our signs and our buttons and everything we say says believe survivors, support survivors, because their stories deserve to be heard and they belong in these spaces. So they are advocated for. And it is my pleasure to now introduce Senator Lindsey Williams, who has been a champion for survivors, for advocates, for a long time now. We are so grateful for her support, and I'm going to pass things over to her.
Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Lindsey Williams. I represent the 38th District in Allegheny County. First, to the survivors who are here today, I want to say that I see you, I hear you, I support you, and your words and stories do matter. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Shannon, for coming and once again telling your story. And while I love seeing you, I love meeting you, I love seeing you again, I wish that we weren't here again. I'm angry that we live in a world where 1 out of every 4 people, 1 out of every 4, will experience rape or sexual violence in their future, in their lifetime. And I'm beyond frustrated that we're here again calling for rape crisis centers to be appropriately funded. That's basically what we are talking about. For 6 years, Pennsylvania budget has flat funded rape crisis centers. And as we said earlier in the program, with inflation and rising cuts, flat funding is actually a cut. We know that. But to make matters worse, last year's budget impasse meant that not only did you not get an increase, you all went without funding for months, for 4 months. We didn't ask you to do more with less. We asked you to do it all with nothing. That's what we did. To borrow money to stay afloat, to lay off staff, to close your doors. The legislature, we failed. We failed in our constitutional obligation to pass a budget that funded you so that you could do your essential work. So not only do I think that you should get increased funding in this year's budget, I think you should get reimbursed for the cost you were out from last year. I think you should be reimbursed for any interest that you owe on loans that you may have taken out. Anything that you had to forego doing as a result, you should get reimbursed for. And I have a bill for that. Senate Bill 1102 would do just that. And that is something that can be included in the budget when we do this increase, right? So as we enter another budget cycle, it's time to stop. It's time to stop the cycle of violence. It's time to stop the cycle of underfunding victim services. And I'm so proud to stand with all the survivors who are here today and every day until those services are funded. Thank you all for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Senator Williams. It is always a pleasure to get to share this space with you and advocate alongside you. I'm going to just close things out with a few closing remarks. We heard what this work looks like on the front lines. We heard what it means to survive, and we heard what happens when support is there, and what happens when it's not. Across Pennsylvania, rape crisis centers are showing up every single day. They are answering calls. They are sitting with survivors in their hardest moments. They are walking with them through healing, through systems, through justice. They are doing everything they can, but they cannot do it without the resources to sustain this work. For years, funding has remained flat while demand continues to grow. This is not neutral. This is not sustainable. This is a cut to survivor services, and the consequences are real. It means longer waits. It means fewer resources. It means advocates stretch beyond capacity. It means survivors not getting the support they need when they need it most. Today is about action. Today we are calling on the Pennsylvania General Assembly to act, to prioritize survivor services, to increase funding for rape crisis centers across the state. This is about people. This is about safety. This is about dignity. And this is about justice. To everyone who showed up today, thank you. To our speakers, our advocates, our partners, thank you for your voices, for your courage, and for your commitment. And to those making decisions, we are here, we are united, and we are not going anywhere. Thank you.